North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. What do? We report the news. The day's news. Honestly, fairly reported. We analyze that news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary. That's not the news. That's just my opinion. Just as valuable as yours. And therefore, we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. And as if it would never, ever end, depending on how long this election takes, we may finally see the end of the 2022 election. Maybe. Who knows? It went from election day to election season, and a lot of people pointed that out, and I'm going, wow, man. All I can say is, good heavens to Betsy. It's the runoff that we've all been waiting for. Ish. Georgia voters are once again left in the fight with the final say of how Congress is going to look as the nation watches the Senate runoff races between Democrat incumbent Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker. Democrats have already secured the upper chamber's majority with victories in other states, but that doesn't mean nothing is at stake today. This from USA Today, by the way. For starters, Georgia's special election will determine whether the chamber remains evenly split at 50-50, which proved to be a difficult tightrope for President Joe Biden and the Democrats. Really? It didn't seem like the Democrats were having any trouble with that at all. Was it just my imagination? Anyway, if Warnock wins, a 51-seat majority gives Senate Democrats control of committees and frees them from leaning on Vice President Kamala Harris to cast tie-breaking votes. But if Walker prevails, that keeps pressure on Democrats to remain united. It also gives their caucus moderates to conservative-leaning senators more power in terms of close judicial nominations or other important administrative confirmations. This is the latest in what we're dealing with here. Governor Brian Kemp, again, this from USA Today, Governor Brian Kemp encouraged Georgia voters to go out and vote for Herschel Walker, as he said he already did in a video posted to Twitter this morning. We've got to have a big turnout today to win this thing. Let's get it done and send someone like Herschel to the United States Senate that is going to fight for us, he said in a 40-second video. During his own campaign for re-election this year, Kemp kept more distance between himself and Walker, not publicly supporting the Republican Senate candidate the way he has since November 8th. Are you paying attention, Mr. McConnell? Senator Mitch McConnell, are you paying attention? This is how a Republican leader actually does his job. That's how this works, in case you're wondering, sir. He made his first appearance with Walker November 19th during a rally northwest of Atlanta. With Walker coming into today's polling slightly behind his opponent, his best shot at success may very well be Governor Kemp. The popular governor could help mobilize voters, especially more moderate Republicans who did not turn out for Walker a month ago. Let's see what else is going on. The Georgia Senate race is one of the most expensive races of the midterm season. This according to Open Secrets. Super PAC spent nearly $16 million more on Warnock than his Republican challenger Herschel Walker ahead of the runoff election, spending more than $40 million on expenses like advertisements supporting Warnock or opposing Walker. Other PACs spent more than $24 million supporting Walker or opposing Warnock. This according to filings reported with the Federal Elections Commission. Money is being spent mainly on TV ads, digital and online communications, and on-the-ground canvassing. So on election night, Senator Raphael Warnock was up about 1 percentage point over Herschel Walker, not enough to avoid a runoff. You've got to have 50% plus one vote. Libertarians drew 2% of the vote, but that was enough to avoid a recount in Georgia. Not enough to avoid a runoff, with Libertarians drawing 2%, but enough to avoid a recount. There we go. Okay. According to the Georgia recount law, losing candidates have the right to a recount from the Secretary of State if they're within half a percentage point of the winner after the results are certified. There's also a procedure if an election administrator or candidate believes that there has been an error in the count. If a candidate requests a recount due to an error, it will happen at the discretion of the Secretary of State. And let's see what else. Georgia Republican Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. I've been trying to talk about this guy for a couple of days because as I was just talking about Governor Kemp of Georgia, Governor Kemp busting his butt for his candidate, right? This is one of those things that this lieutenant governor just hasn't figured out yet. All right, and once again, this is ugly. Georgia Republican Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, who was elected in 2018, told CBS News he would not be voting for Herschel Walker. I think Herschel Walker will probably go down as one of the worst Republican candidates in our party's history. That's what he said last week. I think I've got kids probably who could articulate the conservative platform better than some of the candidates that Donald Trump and his group supported all across the country. Oh, really? You know something, Mr. Lieutenant Governor? It's not your decision. Candidate quality is not determined by you or by Mitch McConnell or any of the other people sitting in that ivory tower in Republican land. Because all those people can do is lose. That's all they do. And I think I've begun to figure out why. I have begun to figure out why Republicans lose. There are a couple of different reasons that you may or may not have thought about. But you know what? President Barack Obama went to Pennsylvania and campaigned his butt off for a guy with a broken brain. A guy with a broken brain. Joe Biden was never the sharpest tool in the shed. And yet the Democrat Party figured out a way to get him elected in 2020, didn't they? No matter what that guy does, no matter what President Biden does, the Democrat Party is right there for him. All the way behind him as much as they possibly can be. And Republicans don't do that. Republicans are now trying to destroy the last Republican president. They're trying to do that right now. Because they want to move back to getting back to being Republicans. You know, Republicans that don't fight Democrats but negotiate with them in the spirit of good bipartisan fellowship. Excuse me? These people are running circles around you. The Democrat Party is running circles around the Republican Party, and our country is suffering because of it. You know, if Democrats, and Democrats, listen, the Democrat Party is not Satan, okay? I have a different opinion about leftist progressives. But the Democrat Party is not Satan, okay? We know that there can be successful Democrat presidents. We've seen one. His name was Bill Clinton. I didn't vote for him either time. Didn't vote for Bill Clinton either time. Wouldn't vote for him if I had another chance. Still can't think of a Democrat I'd vote for. But I'm thinking of a lot more Republicans that I'd never vote for, too. Because now I'm looking for conservatives. I'm not talking about guys who say they're conservative or females that say they're conservative. I'm talking about real conservatives. I'm talking about constitutional people. That's who I'm looking for. Okay? And Republicans aren't them. And Republicans like to lose. GOP Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. You better hope that these namby-pamby sort of pseudo-leftist Republican ulterior motive guys continue in power in your party, because if I was in power in the Republican Party, you would be gone. Gone for that. There's absolutely no excuse. At least Mitch McConnell keeps his mouth shut. At least he keeps his mouth shut. As a matter of fact, he sent a bunch of money to Herschel Walker. He did. But he also mentioned that he had a real problem with a lot of the candidate quality, which was a shot at President Trump. Well, I keep looking back at all these quality candidates that the Republican Party has been giving us. You know, like the perfect Republican candidate. The number one greatest Republican candidate in the history of the party. They gave us that guy. Who was it? That's right. Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney, so pure as the driven snow, so bipartisan, so centrist, so sensible, that they had to go all the way back to his sophomore year in high school to find one fist fight to try to garbage him on. Mitt Romney was the perfect Republican candidate. Man, he would negotiate and try to come up with a compromise for just about everything, including his character and his morals. And you know what? The Republican Party didn't vote for him. Isn't it crazy? Democrat Party didn't vote for him. Nobody voted for him. It's almost like the American people just don't respond to mediocre. No, who do they vote for? They voted for a brash, fast-talking, egocentric Yankee of all people. And I think most of them would do it again. But the Republican Party is trying to trash them. And the Republican Party trying to trash Herschel Walker. They don't care. The Republican Party, and I'm going to make this plain, the Republican Party is not fit to lead a great nation. The Republican Party is not fit to lead a great nation. They don't have what it takes. They don't have what it takes. You got to understand something. It's a lot like a race team. It's a lot like a racing team. Okay? There are an awful lot of people that build the cars. There are a lot of people that design the cars. There are a lot of people that actually make the cars run the way they're supposed to. But there are only a few kinds of people that actually know how to drive them. And that's the kind of candidate that the Republican Party simply will not have anything to do with. Meanwhile, the Democrat Party, anybody with name recognition, we'll do everything we can. We'll throw everything, including the kitchen sink, in on your candidacy, and we'll get you elected, and they do. And once again, that would be fine if the Democrat Party wasn't overrun by a bunch of leftist, socialist, communist, anti-Americans that are trying to destroy the nation. So all of this high-handed, this wonderful, noble willingness to work across the aisle that the Republican Party does is destroying the nation. But aside from that, I have no real strong opinions on the subject. I just cannot stand, and this goes well beyond politics for me. I just can't stand people, groups, teams that have the capability to win and don't do the necessary things to do it. It infuriates me. It absolutely infuriates me. Yes, Bill Clinton is a lowlife, but you know what? He actually got through the presidency without destroying the nation. You compare him to Bill Clinton, compare Bill Clinton to Joe Biden. Who's a better president? This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. By the way, we have all kinds of ways for you to support this radio broadcast. A couple of them are the telephone, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. The other way is to join us on the chat room. A lot of people have done just that. Margie says, hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. All both conservative-leaning Democrats. Mark Greer. Good afternoon, says John Beal. John Beal's a hell of a guy. You ought to meet him. Man, we have great conversations. The guy's a genius. Jesse says, hey, hey. Hi, hi, ho, ho. Let's see what I didn't call you that, by the way. Let's see. Ivani, Evie, hi, how are you? Eddie Jones reports in, headache here. Do you have a headache, buddy? Way too much cheating. I pray it all comes out in the open, praying for Georgia and honestly, with Arizona certifying this fraudulent election. How can they be worse than Fetterman? They got the Democrats got him elected. Correct. That says, Jube Dankworth says that. Candidate quality is code for a MAGA candidate. Candidate quality is anybody that Mitch McConnell can't manipulate. Anybody that Mitch McConnell cannot manipulate is a low-quality candidate. And it doesn't make any difference. And the thing that is absolutely essential that all of us keep in mind, and I don't care whether you are a Republican or a Democrat or at all, it makes no difference. If you're an American and you listen to some political guy talking about the quality of your decision-making, it's because that guy is an arrogant jackass trying to be a totalitarian. That is what he's trying to do. All these people, just like this lieutenant governor, this Republican lieutenant governor in Georgia, the guy is an arrogant jackass. It's not his decision about candidate quality. Candidate quality is determined by the voters, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Mr. Senate Minority Leader. Yeah, that's right, Mr. McConnell. You are the first loser. No, I'm serious. The Republican Party is not fit to lead a great nation. It's not possible. It's just not possible. Let's see. McCarthy spoke about it. He is not for the people. Correct. He is not for the people. This administration does not care. It's full of a bunch of idiots. Well, no, they're not idiots. Just remember, there are people that have real brains that have essentially warped them in favor of politics. They look at things through a political lens, not through a clear eye. Okay, there you go. President Trump is coming back. Yes, before 2024, guaranteed. Well, I don't think so. Unless something really explodes. I don't know what that would be, but we'll see. Your Trump excuse for his termination of the Constitution is inaccurate. I don't have a Trump excuse. He didn't call for the termination of the Constitution. Obviously, either you cannot read or you can't understand what people read to you. All you got to do is look at the statement. That's all you got to do. Let's see. I was pointing out all these wonderful candidates the Republican Party gave us, and Eddie Jones pointed out, well, John McCain. Actually, John McCain was a lousy candidate. He was a lousy candidate. I said so. Yeah. Here we go with the name calling anti-Americans, leftist anti-Americans. Yeah. Leftists. They don't want the First Amendment, free speech. They don't want freedom of religion. They don't want the Second Amendment. They want people to be able to be shot at will by criminals. They don't care about the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment. So if you're anti the first 5 of 6 amendments on the Bill of Rights, does that make you pro or anti-American, Isaac? Yeah, I think that's case closed on that one. You're listening to the Wells Report. Stick around in just a couple of minutes. We'll be back with something that is, as hard as it might be to believe, something really disturbing next. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. All right. So we are waiting for results, and they will happen after this broadcast is finished. When it comes to the Georgia runoff for the United States Senate, Raphael Warnock versus Herschel Walker. Who will win? I don't know. I don't know. And I want to chat about that a little bit. Okay? Do you know who's going to win? Do you have any feeling as to who might win this race? 817-379-2172, or you can use the chat room if you'd like. 817-379-2172. Okay? Do you have any idea who's going to win this? Do you have any idea who's going to win this Senate runoff election in Georgia? Because I don't. And that's interesting for me. Because I sit here in this studio and spend hours watching news and information come across these screens. That's what I do. When I get off of the air, I go outside, I sit down, I stare off into space a little bit, waiting for my neurons to start firing again, because let me tell you something, I burn through a lot of neurons doing this broadcast. I don't feel it while I'm doing it. But when I get finished, I've used so much of my mind, it's like, Arthur Davenport. It's funny. The photo of me looks like I have a pole stuck through my head. Well, I do. Anyway, so when the turbines refire and spin back up a little bit, what do? I go and I watch more news. I try to figure out whether or not I'm on the right track. I try to figure out how my analysis, my reporting, and so on and so forth stacks up with people who do it in other ways. It's amusing to watch how many people borrow from the Wells Report. It's very, very flattering, and I sincerely appreciate it. And by all means, keep doing it. Anything you hear on this broadcast, if you can use it on your broadcast, by all means, do it. Do it. That being said, I don't have any idea who's going to win this election. And I use all that information to come up with these ideas, these feelings, hunches, right? And what I've done is that I've been very successful with my hunches, very successful with my estimates my whole life. And what I've done is I've put myself in a position where after, say, for example, I make an estimate for one reason or another, I go back through the actual results to see where I missed or how I didn't miss or whatever. And in that crazy way of trying to create a better estimate for next time, I make serious thought processes about what I've done and what I've said and what I've estimated and how it actually turned out. And in the last several elections, last 3, I have to tell you that it has been very, very shaky, culminating with the last one, with so many people and so much information and so many things going through regarding up to and including Democrat candidates and their comments. I was pretty sure that the Republican Party was going to do a lot better than they did. They had a fine election. They took control of the House. That's great. That's a success. But I was really surprised that they didn't do better. Now they managed to flip a lot of very interesting minor seats in, say, for example, California and other liberal states. That was significant to me. That was significant. But I was really surprised because things were out of kilter. Things were out of kilter. And as the results came in on the 2020 election and the 2022 election, things were out of kilter. This election is out of kilter. And I don't know, I can't really grab anything in it. It's vaporous. There's nothing I can grab onto. You know, I sit there and I look at the polling that says that Herschel Walker's behind. And I'm going, is that real? Because polling most assuredly was not real just a few months ago, just a month ago. I mean, so I wonder what's going to happen. So nobody really knows. We'll see. And that's fine. But then there's something else. This just gives you a state of play as to where our nation is right now. Okay? The Department of Justice has announced it will be observing the Georgia Senate election today to ensure no violations of voters' civil rights. Herschel Walker, the Trump-endorsed Republican nominee, is running to unseat his Democrat incumbent, or Senator Raphael Warnock. The DOJ released its statement on monitoring polling locations in a press release published today, offering a list of counties under observation. For this election, the Civil Rights Division will monitor for compliance with the federal voting rights law on Election Day in 4 jurisdictions: Cobb County, Fulton County, Gwinnett County, and Macon-Bibb County. Monitors will include personnel from the Civil Rights Division and from U.S. attorneys' offices. I'm not going to read anything else on this. I want to ask you a question. Whose civil rights will the DOJ and the people from the U.S. attorney's offices in Georgia, whose civil rights will they be looking out for? 817-379-2172. Will they be looking out for everyone's civil rights? Yes or no? 817-379-2172. Answer these questions. Answer these questions. The DOJ is going to be monitoring the Senate runoff election in Georgia. They're going to be looking for civil rights violations. Whose civil rights are they looking out for? (817-379-2172). 817-379-2172. Langston said, how about everybody's civil rights that have been violated in past elections? Okay, who are those people? How do we know their civil rights were violated? Who is the divine arbiter of who violates whose civil rights? Well, the Department of Justice. I mean, those are the people that are charged with enforcing the law. Oh, yeah? Does the DOJ actually enforce the law? Doesn't look like it to me. Looks like to me the DOJ is a political organization that uses law to forward a political agenda. Am I wrong? 817-379-2172. Answer the question. Am I incorrect? Do you believe that Merrick Garland is a fair arbiter of federal law enforcement as the Attorney General of the United States? Or is he a political animal bent on the furtherance of the political agenda of the left, using federal law as a tool? Which of those two scenarios are we looking at here? 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Maybe looking at past legislation like the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. Yes. Well, the Supreme Court set aside the Voting Rights Act of 1965 in Texas. And the reason is because essentially it was federal control of Texas elections. And by the way, that happened before the conservative bent in the court, in case you're wondering. So it can't be those people. Who else would it be? Whose rights would the DOJ be trying to protect? Whose civil rights? Would they be protecting the civil rights of, say, MAGA Republicans? Will the DOJ be trying to protect the civil rights of MAGA Republicans? No? Will they be protecting the civil rights of, say, for example, people that have U.S. flags in their pickup trucks and Trump flags in their back of their pickup trucks? Will they be trying to vote? Are they going to be looking to protect their civil rights? Yes or no? Are they going to be protecting, say, for example, the civil rights of what? Somebody with a Biden sticker on their car? Somebody that wears, blue everywhere he goes, especially on election day? Are those the people that they're going to be protecting the civil rights of? Okay, this is kind of a rhetorical question. Because in a real DOJ, you wouldn't have been able to answer no to any of those questions. But you found yourself answering no to some of them, didn't you? Yeah. Why? Well, because we don't have a Department of Justice. We have a Department of Politics through the use of justice. And justice with not just asterisks all over it, but also quotation marks. What we have here is we have essentially the DOJ acting as the enforcement arm of Democrat Party politics. Do you disagree? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Do you disagree? Do you think the DOJ represents everyone? I absolutely do not. I absolutely do believe that the Department of Justice, as currently constituted, is nothing more than the federal law enforcement arm of Democrat politics. That's all. 817-379-2172. Why protect those whose rights were not and have not been violated? There are people whose rights that have been violated throughout the country's history. Are we trying to protect rights that have already been either crushed or upheld? Or are we trying to uphold the rights of the people that are walking around now? Which is it? The idea that we can somehow go back in history and right wrongs that happened before many of us were even born, let alone before any of us ever voted? Yeah, I don't think so. And why protect those rights, those whose rights have not been violated? That's the point. That's the point. The vigilance to protect those rights is the purpose of all the laws that are written to do just that. The protection of those rights, it's essential. And yet, we live in a world where there are notable examples of those rights being cast aside. And what is the common denominator of those castaway rights? Politics in the United States. Politics. A nation founded on free speech cannot find free speech, cannot find civil rights protected in the most prolific communications circumstances, communication tools in the history of the human endeavor. Cannot find free speech. Cannot find truth even. But the DOJ is watching the Georgia Senate runoff election to try to protect people's civil rights. I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that all the right votes get cast. And that's all. And if I'm wrong, by all means, share it. I'm John David Wells. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Sitting here trying to figure out just exactly whose rights the DOJ are trying to protect down in Georgia. Where was the DOJ, for example, in Maricopa County when they were having the first election? Where's the DOJ right now trying to figure out exactly what happened between the time that all the printers in all of these conservative districts were checked, and then all of a sudden they had all kinds of malfunctions the next day? What happened between those times? Telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. What we have is we have a country that's in some kind of strange transition. We have a country that has elections that are out of kilter, as I said before. And we have an awful lot of people who are in a position where they deny the abject reality of this out of kilterness. I just brought up a great point. About the Maricopa County elections. There are all kinds of problems with that election. And once again, people are denying it. Who was denied access in Maricopa County? Well, a whole bunch of voters that swore out affidavits. If you want to know, go into the public domain. This is not like the 2020 election. There are people that actually swore out affidavits that they saw these things. There is standing this time around. But I'm trying to figure out how come the DOJ isn't buried itself in Maricopa County looking at videotape and whatever else it would take to find out just exactly what happened to the printers in 30% of the districts in Maricopa County between the time that they were certified as ready to go after a printer test and then the next day when suddenly they just didn't work. But that's not where the DOJ is today. It's not where the U.S. Attorney's Office is today. No, they're in Georgia, making sure that all of the Democrat votes get counted. Or not. Now remember, I'm not saying that the DOJ is partisan. That's not what I'm saying. Okay? I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with this runoff election. The point that I am making is we don't know either way. We do not know either way. And I'm telling you, the people that sit there and say, no, these elections are perfectly fine. There are absolutely no problems. Perfectly fine. Yeah? I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I absolutely do not. How do printers denied MAGA voters or prevented them from voting? Okay. Obviously, you haven't been reading the news regarding the 2022 election, or maybe there's a short-term memory issue. All I can tell you is this, is that in 30% of the Maricopa County polling places, people went in to vote, and what ended up happening is that their votes were misprint. They were misprinted. The tabulators could not read them. 20% of them weren't counted at all. And they were put in a bag with other votes that would be counted later. There are all kinds of people that were disenfranchised in that conversation, in that vote. All voters had issues, not just MAGA voters. These were in conservative districts. This is already down on paper, man. You know, you really, if you're going to, this is like a news show, okay? So we actually do know what we're talking about. I do. I will tell you what I think about news, and that is not news. But when I report the news, it's the news. You gotta read up, okay? They were not just MAGA voters. I'm not the one that brought up the term MAGA voters. I said that there were conservative voters in conservative districts. That's where these problems were, and they were in Maricopa County and nowhere else. Come on, guys. You know, this is one of the problems. This is exactly what I'm talking about here. These are intelligent people. One of the persons I'm talking about has 2 college degrees, 2 of them. And yet, does not see or does not hear what I'm saying. And what I'm saying is pretty plain. I'm not saying anybody's cheating any of these elections. I'm saying that we, the people of the United States, don't know one way or another. And that's the problem. You know, they just don't have this trouble with the Powerball lottery. Don't have any problem with this in Powerball lottery. Actually, more people played the Powerball lottery than voted in the entire national election. Most of them were the same people, but that doesn't matter. They kept track of all the numbers. They had results instantly. And we can't do that with our elections? Is it because we can't? Or is it because we won't? This is the Wells Report, back with hour number 2 in just a moment. Thanks for joining us, guys. Appreciate you being here. Hour number 2 right around the corner. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news. That's right. We report the news honestly, fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary. That's not news. That's just my opinion. Just as valuable as yours. And so if you share yours and I share mine, then we can debate. And if we indeed debate, then we'll have more information at the end of the broadcast than we do right now. I'm just saying, this is what we need to do right now. We need to have these conversations. So let's do it. It is the Wells Report. The President of the United States is headed to Arizona. Arizona is a border state. Hundreds of thousands of people flood over that border constantly. The president is aware that the border issue is absolutely a disaster, but he ignores it. Why does he ignore it? How does he ignore it? How does that happen? Well, I can tell you how it happens. It happens because he doesn't have to actually deal with it. And when he does have an opportunity to deal with it, once again, he shirks that responsibility. Let me give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about right now.
Border, because there's more important thing going on. They're going to invest billions of dollars in a new enterprise.
Mr. President, the power outages in North Carolina.
I don't know.
Do you have any idea?
And so what are you going to do when you go to the border? I mean, are you going to go down there and visit the border? No, there are more important things going on. There are more important things going on, Mr. President? Are you kidding? 4 million people have come to the United States of America illegally since you've been the President of the United States, sir. While I disagree with the term invasion, we are certainly being overrun. We are being overrun. And the President of the United States lives in a building that is right around the corner. From a building that has the Constitution of the United States, and the Constitution plainly says that the federal government of the United States will make sure the borders are secure, and they don't do it. He's in violation of his oath of office. And then when somebody says, by the way, are you going to go down there and actually see for yourself the incredible damage being done to the border of the United States, the laughingstock that we are around the world because of the border of the United States? He says, no, there are more important things to do. There are more important things to do. Let them eat cake. Let them eat cake. Or more appropriately, let them eat fentanyl. 302 people every single day in the United States die of fentanyl overdoses. That is a 9/11 attack death toll every 10 days. But there are more important things to do in Arizona. Oh yeah, they're gonna put up windmills and solar farms on federal land. And that's more important, huh? It's more important than 300 Americans dying every day of fentanyl overdosing. Really? Biden made the defense just before boarding Marine One to depart the White House. Biden has never visited the border throughout his presidency, despite the ongoing crisis with record numbers of illegal immigrants crossing the border every month. Why go to a border state and not visit the border, said Peter Doocy, which is the guy who was yelling in the background. Because there are more important things going on. They're going to invest billions of dollars in a new enterprise. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre dismissed the Republican border visits as political stunts last month. The U.S. has seen record levels of immigration throughout the Biden administration. U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported 230,000 border encounters in October alone. That's an all-time monthly record that broke the previous record set in September. September data revealed fiscal year 2022 ended with 2,378,944 migrant encounters, the highest ever recorded in a fiscal year. That figure does not include the nearly 600,000 known gotaways that CBP sources told Fox News evaded capture over the same weekend. That is almost 3 million migrants. 3 million migrants in 1 year. The Biden administration repeatedly has sought to dismiss border searches as yearly patterns. While the southern border has seen a pattern of increases in migration each spring, the surges in both 2021 and 2022 far outpaced previous years. That pace only escalated throughout the year. Why? Because they're being invited here. That's why. They're being invited here. All of these sanctuary cities that are complaining about the fact that suddenly they're having to deal with actual migrants coming actually to their actual sanctuary cities. Declaring states of emergency. Oh my God, this is terrible. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? We need federal help. We've got to have some of that. What are we doing? And the thing about that is they completely ignore the fact that people here in Texas and Arizona and California, and to a lesser degree, New Mexico, have been drowning under the weight of all of these illegal immigrants. They have a few thousand. They think their entire world is coming unglued. Then they sit there and they go, "Oh my God, it's just not the same." Yes, it isn't the same. The difference is that you invited these people to your cities with your sanctuary city policies. You invited them. It's just like all those same cities and their homeless problems. They invited the homeless there. They showed up. And your neighbors are being overrun by people that are on their way to your cities because you keep inviting them there. Vice President Kamala Harris, who President Biden tapped to lead the administration effort to address the border crisis, has argued the border is closed, telling migrants firmly, do not come. No, no, no. Are they paying attention? No, no, no. No. Many of the migrants that Fox News speaks to, because people that work for Fox News can speak Spanish, the Spanish say the border is abierta, open. Some of the migrants also praised President Biden personally. Isn't that nice? Yeah. And so the recriminations and the criticism of the president saying, oh my God, there are more important things to do in Arizona than go to the silly border. People blasted the president almost instantly. And then what happened? Well, the White House fired right back. They fired back at critics attacking President Joe Biden for saying he had more important things to do in Arizona than visit the U.S.-Mexico border on today. Biden is in Arizona to visit a Taiwanese-owned chip manufacturing facility and celebrate efforts to fix the supply chain for the key resource. He faced heavy criticism from Representative Chip Roy from Texas and others for his comment, but the White House now argues that President Biden was only reflecting the views of a majority of Americans. Really? A majority of Americans elected Donald Trump in 2016 because he said he was going to do something about the border. That's a majority of Americans. 74 million of those people voted in 2020 for the same thing. The border is a problem. And you know it, Mr. President, because after saying that you were not going to allow another foot of wall to be built, not another foot, not one more foot of wall is going to be built. You finished the border wall in Arizona, didn't you? Yeah. You finished that border wall in Arizona. Why'd you do that? Well, because Mark Kelly was going to get his butt kicked if you didn't. And so you fixed it, didn't you? You know there's a problem, sir. You just don't want to admit it. So the majority of Americans want the border closed. They find this to be reprehensible and ridiculous, but the president and his handlers are saying, no. The president is only reflecting the views of a majority of Americans. A majority of Americans, they don't care whether these people come in. I'll let them come on in. Come on in. Let them vote. Let them do all that stuff. By all means, come on. It's the majority of Americans. Just let it go. The president was clear that his top priority is investing in the American economy and American communities, outcompeting China and bringing American jobs from overseas. In fact, Fox News' own analysis showed the economy is the top issue for most Americans. If anybody believes that shouldn't be the president's top priority too, they should say that out loud. This is what we call passive-aggressive fact massage. Okay? Yeah, that's right. They are not talking about whether or not the president is bringing back jobs from overseas. In point of fact, he's not. They're talking about whether or not, they're not also, by the way, talking about the economy outcompeting China. The economic issue they're talking about is inflation. 7.7% this month, somehow swept under the mainstream media carpet. 7.7% higher prices than last year. It takes about $500-600 out of everybody's budget every single month. And that's the economic issues the president was talking about, not whether or not we're competing with China, not about bringing American jobs back from across the border. No, I'm sorry. They're talking about inflation. And so what they did is they just went on the offensive. And by the way, if you don't think that outcompeting China and all this other stuff that doesn't really matter to most Americans, even though we're saying it matters to most Americans, is not true, then you should say it out loud. Of course, if I was there, I'd go, okay, I'll say it out loud. That's spin. That's baloney. The American people are concerned about inflation. You're not doing anything about that, except making it worse when you could make it easier and better with the flick of a switch, the one that turns on the Keystone XL pipeline construction. But you won't do it, will you? Yep. Of course, the president is also taking action to secure our border and build a fair, orderly, and humane immigration system. Really? Have you heard anything about the fair, orderly, and humane immigration system? Have you heard any debates about it whatsoever? I have not heard a damn thing about the fair and orderly, humane immigration system. All I've heard about is the chaotic, flippin', creepy, dangerous, raping and drug dealing and all the kind of terrible things that happen on the border. I've actually been there, so I've seen a lot of it myself. The depravity, the savagery, the ridiculousness, the beheadings, the choppings, the rapings. And they haven't. And they haven't. And all they're trying to talk about is this safe and orderly, humane immigration system, which they don't come up with because it doesn't serve a political end. The raping, drug smuggling, human smuggling, terrorist smuggling, chaotic, wide open border serves the political agenda, which should tell you something about the politicians that are making it happen. There are only 4 reasons why the border is the way it is. Only 4. 1, the people who are leaving it open are either a proponent of or a consumer of human sex trafficking. 2, the people leaving the border open are either proponents of or consumers of unfettered drug smuggling. 3, the people who leave the border open are either proponents of or perhaps sponsors of the importation of humans being smuggled into the United States, not the same as humans being trafficked into the United States. One's the sex trade. Human smuggling is about getting people in the United States that couldn't get into the United States otherwise. 100 of the people that have gotten into the United States are terrorists. How many people knocked down the Twin Towers? 19. So you're either a proponent of, or you have an interest in smuggling terrorists into the United States. The fourth reason why the border is open the way it is, there are only 4. It's because the people that are allowing the border to stay the way it is are on a cartel payroll. So which is it, Mr. President? Are you a consumer of human sex trafficking? Are you a druggie? You like your marijuana and maybe a little bit of quarter dose of fentanyl every now and then? Or, you're really looking to be a wartime president, so the best way to do that is to import terrorists into the United States that, say, for example, smuggle a nuclear weapon into Denver and blow it into a crater so that you can be a wartime president. Or you're on a cartel payroll. Of course, how could I possibly think that you would have anything to do with illicit money exchange, deals, money exchanging hands from foreign places and so on and so forth around the world? Why would I even think that's possible for you, Mr. President? Does any of this make any sense to anybody but me? This is what I do. I sit down and I read the news and I make sure you know what the news is. I also make sure that you see what I see because of the news that I keep reporting over and over and over again, like this open border that never gets closed. Like this president who says, my God, there are just more important things for me to do than go down to the stupid border in Arizona. Gosh, there's a chip factory that's opening up from the Taiwanese, yeah. And, of course, the White House is talking about me bringing jobs to America. Yeah, and all that money's going back to Taiwan. But, we love them anyway. We don't care if they make money. Yeah, I see this. I try to help you see it. I don't know whether I'm being successful, but I certainly hope I am. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. I just realized something that I had skipped the break, so you're just going to have to keep dealing with me. You're just going to have to keep dealing with me. I was so into what I was doing, I forgot. I forgot what I was doing. Let me get back to some of this, and we'll go through some of the things that we were dealing with. Based on what I was talking about before, great analysis. I agree with you, JD. Congress should be called out too. Absolutely. This is, when I start talking about all of this, I talk about all of this political mess that we have ourselves in. It's the lowest common denominator are the politicians. Why do we have a political mess? Because of the politicians that are in the middle of the political mess. There's another name for it. It's called the swamp. And so there you go. Done on purpose, just don't care. Human trafficking, drugs, cartels with criminals flooding in. It's horrific. Yeah, it is. You think it's horrific where you are? You ought to see it from where I've been. You can't believe it. You just can't believe it. Being overrun is an invasion. Invasions are typically armed armies, with tanks and rockets and bombs and so on and so forth. That's an invasion for me. Think about another recent invasion. That's what Russia did to Ukraine. They showed up with weapons. These people aren't really showing up with weapons, so technically it's an overrun. That's the difference. But let's not split hairs. You know, if you're going to fend off this overrun of people coming across your border, then you're going to have to use a rule or you're going to have to use a law that has the word invasion in it. And that's exactly what Governor Abbott has done. So there you go. Margie says windmills and solar panels are ruining the country. What a joke. Yep. Yeah, there's not enough sunlight hitting the entire Earth to be able to power the entire Earth. And once again, if all these people are also fired interested in this, you can take windmill electricity and solar panel electricity a hell of a lot farther if you have superconductors. If the government was really serious about changing the actual energy makeup of our economy, they'd be going after room temperature superconductors. That's what they'd be doing. That's who would be getting tax loopholes and tax credits and so on and so forth, not solar panel manufacturers. That's almost that technology is at least 70 years old. Oh yeah, we have better solar cells than we used to, but that's not the point. They're still hopelessly inefficient. The people that should be getting tax subsidies and so on and so forth are people making superconductors, but the government isn't serious. The government isn't serious. Windmills and solar panels. Yeah, we're going to go back to the 14th century for our power. Smart idiots. Let's see, I pray for the innocent children. I'm not worried about the innocent children. I'm still trying to get through the end of my life, thank you. I'll start when I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to start getting through the end of my life. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start praying for the innocent children. Don't mean to sound callous, but you got to be real. Let's see, Ali Bradley is one of the best journalists on border issues, just my opinion. I don't understand what people expect Biden going to the border will accomplish. Well, maybe he'll actually see something that actually opens up his eyes a bit. I mean, it's really hard to go down to the border and not see what's actually there. It's really hard. I mean, you got to be purposeful to ignore it, just like Kamala Harris did when she went to El Paso. Mr. Wells, you're accurate when you said handlers instead of President Biden. Exactly. We know the actual number on inflation is higher. Yeah, 7.7 this month. Doesn't that qualify as hyperinflation? No, it's got to be in the 20 percentile to be able to do that. All right, you're listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Stick around. Coming up in just a couple of seconds, we're going to be spending time with the Supreme Court of the United States. It's next. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast. There is breaking news at this hour. This from the New York Times. The Trump organization has been found guilty in a tax fraud scheme. This is being reported by the New York Times. Donald J. Trump's family real estate business was convicted on Tuesday, today, of tax fraud and other financial crimes, a remarkable rebuke of the former president's company, and what prosecutors described as its, quote, culture of fraud and deception, unquote. The conviction in all 17 counts, after more than a day of jury deliberation in the state Supreme Court in Manhattan, resulted from a long-running scheme. Now remember, this is biased coverage because it's the New York Times. Resulted from a long-running scheme in which the Trump organization doled out off-the-books luxury perks to some executives. They received fancy apartments, leased Mercedes-Benzes, even private school tuition for relatives, none of which they paid taxes on. The criminal tax fraud trial of Donald J. Trump's family real estate business hinged on endless rows of spreadsheets and tax documents bristling with indecipherable numbers. I'm sorry, an indecipherable number would be a doodle, wouldn't it? Most people in the courtroom did not. I'm carping on the quote unquote journalism. They're not indecipherable numbers. Just because you can't look at a number and see what's there doesn't mean it's indecipherable. It just means that you can't read what's in front of you. Most people in the courtroom did not know that one participant was unusually equipped to digest those dry details. The presiding judge, Juan Merchant, he's 60 years old. As a young man, he worked for several years as an internal auditor at a small real estate development company. So this is what happened. Mr. Weisselberg was the guy who was testifying. He did not implicate Mr. Trump in any of this wrongdoing. One of his lawyers, Mary Mulligan, said in a statement, "We thank and respect the jurors for the important role they play in the judicial system." Mr. Faturfus told a group of reporters the Trump organization would soon release a statement on the verdict, but he said a novel and really interesting issue developed during the trial, which was the definition of "in behalf of." The prosecution was charged with persuading the jury that when top executives engaged in the tax fraud scheme, they acted in behalf of the company. That will be one of the arguments we will make. It was central to the case. Alan Faturfus, a defense lawyer for the company, said the company will appeal. Mr. Weisselberg remains a Trump Organization employee where he is on paid leave. He was the guy that was charged in all this, by the way. He was charged as the ringleader in all of this. He remains a Trump Organization employee where he is on paid leave. His future with the company that he has served for decades is now uncertain. Yeah, I would say so. So the investigation by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office into the former president and his family real estate business began more than 3 years ago. The verdict was good news. Well, hang on just a second here. Let me see if I can get back to this. The guilty verdict. Okay, hold on. Whoa. See, this is skipping all over the place. This is not a story that works. Because they keep going back and forth between different things. It's almost like it's like a group of disjointed facts. Let me see what I can do about finding something that's a little more cogent. Here's CNN. This is CNN's thing. Forgive me if some of this stuff repeats. A Manhattan jury has found 2 Trump Organization companies guilty on multiple charges of criminal tax fraud and falsifying business records connected to a 15-year scheme to defraud tax authorities by failing to report and pay taxes on compensation for top executives. The Trump Corporation and Trump Payroll Corporation were found guilty on all charges they faced. Donald Trump and his family were not charged in the case, but the former president was mentioned repeatedly during the trial by prosecutors about his connection to the benefits doled out to certain executives, including company-funded apartments, car leases, and personal expenses. The Trump Organization could face a maximum of $1.61 million in fines when sentenced in mid-January. The company is not at risk of being dismantled because there is no mechanism under New York law that would dissolve the company. However, A felony conviction could impact its ability to do business or obtain loans or contracts. Okay. The guilty verdict comes as Trump is this is a civil trial. There is no felony conviction. Yeah, a felony conviction will really screw you up, but it doesn't have anything to do with this trial. What are they talking about? Anyway, let's move on. The guilty verdict comes as this is all about a fine. It's about $1.61 million in fines. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar corporation. $1.61 million in fines? Oh, okay. The guilty verdict comes as Trump is under scrutiny by federal and state prosecutors for his handling of classified documents, which has nothing to do with this particular story. The effort to overturn the 2020 election results, again, has nothing to do with this story. And the accuracy of the Trump Organization's business records and financial statements. 2 out of 3. Has nothing to do with the story, but that does. He's also facing a $250 million civil lawsuit from the New York Attorney General, alleging that he and his adult children were involved in a decade-long fraud. The Attorney General is seeking to permanently bar them from serving as an officer or a director of a company in New York, among other penalties. That's not going to happen. This is a case about greed and cheating, said Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. Now, remember, all of these statements are basically being made because they can't be refuted. It's not that they're necessarily true. Okay, you can look at it as greed and cheating if you want to. That's one way of characterizing it. Another way is, trying to perk some of your top executives with stuff that you should have kept better track of. I don't know, in the old way of. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. So when people in the Democrat Party, okay, are guilty of something that's criminal, what ends up happening is that someone will come along and say, well, they're not criminal, they're just incompetent. So we keep having to choose between what is competence or what is malevolence. In this particular case, this was about greed and cheating. Well, that's malevolence. If this was about Hillary Clinton or, let's say, the Biden family, or maybe that guy that got popped for screwing up with everybody's cryptocurrency accounts, they would have said he just didn't know what he was doing, because that's what they're saying about the crypto dude. That's what they're saying. He just didn't know what he was doing. But no, this is a case about greed and cheating. Now, look, like I said, it might be greed and cheating. It might be all of those things. All right? All I'm pointing out is the actual storytelling. The storytelling is, once again, not consistent with storytelling involved with other families and their odd business practices. Let's just put it that way. The Trump Corporation, the Trump Payroll Corporation, got away with a scheme that rewarded high-level executives with lavish perks and compensation while intentionally concealing the benefits from taxing authorities to avoid paying taxes, which is stupid. Why would you do that? That's just plain stupid. I'm really surprised the Trump Corporation got popped with this. That's dumb. Today's verdict holds these Trump companies accountable for their long-running criminal scheme. CNN senior legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Ellie Honig said Bragg's approach was vindicated. Obviously, this is a setback for the Trump Organization, a major setback for the Trump Organization. They've now been found guilty of criminal conduct and criminal tax fraud. Criminal tax fraud. All right. Well, maybe it is a criminal case. I'm concerned. I'm confused. If this, how do you charge a company with a criminal problem? You have to charge somebody in the company, don't you? Anyway, we'll figure it all out as we keep rolling. I mean, that's the latest breaking news, in case you were wondering. Okay. Speaking of odd family business practices, there's this. Remember the the Twitter files day before yesterday. There's supposed to be more yesterday or what have you. I haven't been over to Twitter lately to see if anything has come up. But the last I heard was Elon Musk said we're going to need a few more days on Twitter files number 2. Anyway, the White House finally responded about Twitter files 1. They downplayed the Twitter CEO Elon Musk's file dump regarding the social media platform's decision to suppress news stories about Hunter Biden's laptop before the 2020 election as a distraction. We see this as an interesting or in a coincidence, if I may, that he would be so haphazardly, that Twitter would haphazardly push this distraction that is full of old news, if you think about it, said Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. At the same time, Twitter is facing very real and very serious questions about the rising volume of anger, hate, and anti-Semitism on their platform as she distracts from the reality of the statement. You see, it is a distraction. And I talked about it on Twitter today. My tweet about this was, it sure was a distraction. How was it talk to me about the distraction? I'll be more than happy to do it. Let's see here. Yeah, I had a whole bunch I was on a really hot roll. Today. Let's see. A let 'em eat cake moment. A let 'em eat cake moment for Bernie. I'm sorry, from the president. He defends while visiting Arizona, not going to the. Here we go. Not going to the border. Here we go. White House dismisses Hunter Biden laptop Twitter files as a distraction. I wrote, correct. Twitter's expose of censorship of apparent Biden family corruption is a distraction. It distracts from the mainstream media, big tech, FBI, and White House dishonesty and criminal election tampering. That's what it's distracting from. And that is awful. Yeah. The mainstream media lied about the Hunter Biden laptop story. The FBI managed the Hunter Biden laptop story right before the election to keep it from the public eye. The mainstream media complied, and so did social media. Big tech, mainstream media, the United States government, through the auspices of the FBI, conspired. And yes, I'm using that word on purpose. It is a conspiracy to censor an important news story that touches on what could be Biden family corruption that doesn't really involve whether or not an executive from the Biden Corporation is driving a Mercedes without reporting it to tax authorities. No, this is about graft and corruption. This is about influence peddling. This is about a whole bunch of real serious stuff. Don't get me wrong. Hey, criminal fraud is a big deal. If the Trump organization actually did all that and tried to not pay taxes, which is stupid, I mean, then they deserve it. But $1.61 million out of the Trump organization? Okay, let me write that out of my personal account, says Eric Trump. Okay. But yeah, there are an awful lot of people that need to spend a little bit of time taking a look in the mirror and seeing what they see there. I want to know exactly what ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN are thinking right this very moment, because they don't cover this story. Not only did they not cover the Hunter Biden laptop in the first place, now they're not covering the story about the Hunter laptop being actually real, authentic, because they look like fools. And what they're hoping is it's just going to disappear. The American people will be distracted by a new shiny object. But what have we learned? The FBI knew exactly what was in the computer. That's why they were telling big tech, hey, there's some stuff out there that's deleterious about Hunter Biden. It's Russian disinformation. That's what that is. Yeah. But they knew what was there. They knew about the credit card transactions. They knew about all the rest of it. And they hid it from the American people. And the mainstream media went along. And social media went along. And that's where we find the United States of America this day, this 6th day of December, year of our Lord, 2022. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Reports. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. We are taking a look at some of the things that people are saying on the chat room. I'm very, very concerned about this Hunter Biden laptop story. We would never have known what actually went on with that story had Elon Musk not purchased Twitter. I would suggest the following. If you have not decided to be a Twitter customer, maybe you should reconsider. If you are someone who believes that we need to have a better mainstream media, a better, more honest government, that we should have federal law enforcement that doesn't play politics, you need to get on Twitter right now, because you need to support Elon Musk. You know, he could use the money because he just spent $44 billion on Twitter. Might want to keep him in that place for a while until we get the real truth out of it. Let's see. I'm talking about human trafficking with children. Yes. JD, you need to check your information regarding solar energy. There's more than enough solar energy striking the earth to power our civilization. The trick is harnessing and distributing the power. Right. All I can tell you is that none of that is anything more than academic, Arthur, until we have superconductors that function at room temperature. That's what we should be looking at. Brian says, add that 7.7% to the last 2-year inflation totals. Seems to me that we are over 20% by now. That's not exactly how they measure it, Brian. The way they measure it is how much prices have gone up or down based on last year. So it's year to year. It's month to month. Okay. The average is right around 8% inflation right now, maybe 7.9, but right around 8%, which is way too high, which is why the Fed is raising interest rates and trying to cool the economy. It's working to a degree. We'll see if they're patient, okay? But buckle your seatbelts for next year, okay? Buckle your seatbelts for next year because there's going to be a recession. Things are going to be hard for a few years. That's just the way that works. Maybe not. Maybe the Fed can engineer this soft landing they're talking about. Okay? The Fed is comprised of people that really know what they're doing, and they have done some mighty fancy banking. Okay? Let's see. BLM and Antifa burned cities down through bricks and bottles at police. There are people that don't have any problem with that, or the tens of millions of dollars stolen by BLM leaders and helped nobody. Yeah, where are people chasing that money down? While we're chasing down tax fraud, maybe we should be chasing down some of that. Let's see. Maybe when some of these SARs are brought to light, those are suspicious action reports. It's actually an SIR, I believe, Mark. Brought to light, the mainstream media will be forced to report on them. I don't think so. Even just to attempt to spin them, or they may just choose to ignore them. Out of sight, out of mind. We didn't report it, so it didn't happen method of journalism? Correct. It's not whether or not we have solar power. It's whether or not we can harness it efficiently. Correct. Absolutely. So that's what's going on. As far as, and I know I'm skipping around a lot. As far as this is concerned, let's take a look at what this Hunter Biden laptop story means. Okay? It means the following. Hunter Biden may or may not be involved in multinational money laundering, influence peddling. There may be indeed international investments in the Biden family with an expected return that we may or may not have seen already. And that laptop would have just disappeared had it not been for the fact that a computer salesperson got the computer, and as a part of his typical business practice, and I don't know why he did this. I would probably be a little annoyed if he had done it with my computer, but made a complete mirror of the hard drive and then tried to turn it into the FBI. And the FBI wasn't interested until it hit the news. Suddenly they were interested. By that time, Rudy Giuliani had gotten a copy of it. If Rudy Giuliani does not get a copy of the Hunter Biden laptop, we never hear about it again. Now, remember, we only know a little bit about what's on that laptop. I don't know what they're waiting for. There either is incredibly damaging information on that laptop, or there isn't. Now, the question is the stuff on the laptop so damaging that it would actually damage the nation more than it's worth? In other words, is the political fix in? Or maybe this isn't that much of a big deal. What is a big deal, however, is how Twitter, the mainstream media, all covered it up with the help of the FBI. That's the story. So what's on the laptop? Not really concerned about that too much. I'm trying to figure out why the FBI wanted to keep it under wraps. And I want to know why the FBI got the cooperation of the mainstream media and big tech and social media to make that happen. That's what I want to know. This is the Wells Report, back with hour number 3 in just a moment. Once again, thanks very much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. See you in a little bit. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. That's how you get through to us on the telephone. If you would like to join us on the chat room that's going on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, well, go to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. You already know it's there. If, by the way, you're watching this on Rumble and Patreon, well, this was recorded earlier in the day. Yeah, you missed it. We're live from 2 until 5 p.m. on those other platforms. So you can either join us there or you can wait until I put this thing up after the show's over at about 5 o'clock Central Time. So that's how you get through to the broadcast. Thanks very much for doing so. I'm glad you're here. We are talking about the news of the day, and part of that news is as follows. The January 6th committee investigating the Capitol attack on that date has decided to recommend to the Justice Department criminal charges, but has not yet identified who will be targeted, according to the chairman talking to reporters today. Huh? The panel has already made 4 criminal referrals against 4 people accused of contempt of Congress for defying committee subpoenas. The department charged 2 of them. Additional committee recommendations could reach as high as former President Donald Trump and cover crimes beyond the riot, such as perjury or witness tampering. Representative Benny Thompson of Mississippi, he's a Democrat, told reporters the committee has not narrowed down the universe of individuals that may be referred. This according to CNN. At this point, there will be a separate document coming from me to the DOJ. The committee's recommendations, which will be included in its final report expected by Christmas, are non-binding, but would reflect a legislative perspective for executive branch investigations to consider. Now, the interesting thing about that is those executive branch investigations may or may not move forward based on what happens with the political climate of the United States. As we've seen, politics has a much larger role in federal law enforcement than it should. So keep that in mind. The Justice Department declined to comment on the announcement. How bad. Norm Eisen, a lawyer who served as counsel to the Democrat House committee leading Trump's first impeachment, said he expects the recommendations to focus on 2 allegations: the attempt to defraud the United States through overturning the 2020 election and obstruction of an official governmental proceeding or congressional proceeding. Despite the Justice Department's already investigating aggressively, Eisen said that the recommendations would be important to explain the evidence and the allegations. Number 1, they stiffen the spine of state and federal prosecutors by encouraging them to act, said Eisen. Number 2, they provide important information, the roadmap, the evidence. That's the most critical part. Well, yeah, I guess you could say it that way, but also remember that investigation is a political one, not one of law enforcement. So in other words, what you're getting is a political spin on all of the evidence that they have collected, which may or may not be accurate from a legal standpoint. This is the thing that I've been pointing out about the January 6th committee the entire time. And it was a self-inflicted wound. They shot themselves in the foot. If they had spent more time actually doing it properly, then their investigation, albeit political, if they had actually followed the legal framework, actually followed the way a police investigation would have been followed, they would have gotten a lot farther, assuming, of course, they actually had the goods on the person they were trying to chase down, which was President Trump. Something tells me they didn't actually have the goods on the president, which is why they made it a political thing. Well, that still doesn't make it possible for an honest-to-goodness law enforcement agency that has to show up in court and convince not just a judge that the actual charges are worth something, but a jury that the charges are actually real. So those prosecutors have a long way to go before they'll take a congressional referral for criminal action and actually do something with it. And if the January 6th committee had been more interested in due process for President Trump, they would have gotten a lot farther. They would have gotten a lot farther, and maybe, maybe that's good for people who happen to support President Trump. But if the January 6th committee had done this right, it would have taken longer, but we would know more. The people of the United States would have a much better idea of what was going on. But as it turns out, the way we are right now, people look at what the January 6th committee did and they believe it was nothing more than a witch hunt, than a lynch mob to get Donald Trump. And a lot of people on that basis don't believe their work. Again, this was a self-inflicted wound given to themselves by the fact that they were only looking at politics. If they had actually looked at trying to find truth instead of trying to create some sort of political advantage, we, the people, would have been far better served. Just saying. Just saying. He and Eisen, this guy that I'm talking about again, let me find out who he is. Norm Eisen, the lawyer who served as a counsel to the Democrats. He and Deborah Perlin, a policy director for the advocacy group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, I'm sorry, said referrals could target Trump, former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Trump personal lawyer John Eastman, and former Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark. I don't see any of that happening. I just don't. I don't see any of it happening, and I'll tell you why again. A prosecutor is going to look at all of this, and they're going to say, okay, what do the people of the United States, what does the jury pool know? Absolutely nothing about any of the other side. Somebody was asking me, well, John David, what's the other side of the evidence that was presented by the January 6th committee? Well, that's a flaw right there. It should have been evidence presented to the January 6th committee, not by the January 6th committee. Anyway, they were operating as their own prosecutor. What they should have done is they should have been in a situation where they actually cared more about truth than politics, and they didn't do it. And the thing about it is that once again, these people were so partisan that a prosecutor is going to look at this and say, there's no way I can proceed with this. There is no way that I can proceed with this because there's only half the story. And so none of this is going anywhere. These criminal referrals are basically another shiny object. Shiny object. Hello. A subcommittee of lawyers on the House panel, Representative Liz Cheney, Zoe Lofgren, Jamie Raskin, Adam Schiff, have studied potential criminal recommendations. Schiff, a former federal prosecutor, led Trump's first impeachment for dealings with Ukraine. That should be the first unsuccessful impeachment. Raskin led the second impeachment dealing with the January 6th, 2021 attack. There are serious minds and serious legal thinkers who believe the threshold has been met to make criminal referrals, who believe the prosecution is required, said Perlin. Well, all I can say is that if that was actually the case, there'd already be indictments. There would already be indictments in the lap of Donald Trump if they were real. Now, once again, we have to throw politics back into this, as if we really want to throw politics into federal law enforcement. They may be waiting until they're farther down the line in the 2024 election before they start throwing these indictments around. Or they want to see whether or not Donald Trump is going to be a serious candidate. This is just awful. This is just a mess. It's just that these people are chewing on each other like this to the detriment of we, the people of the United States and this nation, that they are doing this for political points and nothing more is just infuriating. Now, don't get me wrong. The politicians are fighting for their life against Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not a politician. Donald Trump represents a completely different way of doing business in the United States. Donald Trump has exposed the width and depth and breadth of a breathtaking swamp that involves the mainstream media, that involves federal law enforcement, that involves all of these things in this political machine that essentially believes that they are the real force that run the United States of America, and we are just living in their world, which is the exact opposite of the reality. We, the people, first three words of the Constitution. Not we, the politicians. Not we, the policemen. We, the people. And there are far more of us than there are of you. And I think they're beginning to forget that a little bit. I think that's fascinating. Anyway, by the way, the Justice Department already charged more than 800 people in the riot. There were 15,000 of them there. What happened to the other 14,200? What were they doing? Why weren't they arrested? Anyway, two members of the Oath Keepers, a far-right militia, were convicted last month of seditious conspiracy. The department continues to investigate the role of organizers and financiers of the protest. Garland appointed a special counsel to weigh potential charges against the people, including President Trump, for January 6th and for documents seized at his Florida estate, Mar-a-Lago. While we're on that subject, let's move on with this. Special counsel Jack Smith is the guy who's doing that, by the way, has sent grand jury subpoenas to local officials in Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin, three states that were central to former President Donald Trump's failed plan to stay in power following the 2020 election, seeking any and all communications with President Trump, his campaign, and a long list of aides and allies. The request for records arrived in Dane County, Wisconsin, Maricopa County, Arizona, Wayne County, Michigan, late last week, and in Milwaukee on Monday, according to officials. They are among the first known subpoenas issued since Smith was named last month by Attorney General Merrick Garland to oversee the January 6th Capitol attack case, as well as the criminal probe of President Trump's possible mishandling of classified documents at his Florida home. The subpoenas, at least three of which are dated November 22nd, indicate that the Justice Department is extending its examination of the circumstances leading up to the Capitol attack to include local election officials and their potential interactions with the former president and his representatives. The virtually identical request to Arizona and Wisconsin named Trump individually, in addition to employees, agents, and attorneys for the campaign. Details of the Michigan subpoena, confirmed by the Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, were not immediately available. So that, by the way, from the Washington Post. Just bringing you up to date with all the news. All the news, right? Okay. Coming up in just a couple of seconds. So what do you do when crime is rampant and you want to do something about it? What do you do? Well, in the case of Philadelphia, you do something. What is that something? I'm not exactly sure you're going to believe it. I mean, I looked at it 2 or 3 times and I went, he did what? I'll share that with you in just a couple of seconds. This is the Wells Report. Back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Yes, Gary Abshire points out that the results from the Senate runoff in the state of Georgia should be coming in around 6 p.m. Central Time. 6 p.m. Central Time. Lots of early voting. I don't know. I have not heard about what the turnout has been. Earlier today, it was brisk. All right. So there's that. So if you happen to live, say, for example, in a leftist-run town like New York, L.A., Chicago, Philadelphia, you live in exciting times in the classic Chinese sense, which, by the way, living in exciting or interesting times is a curse. A gas station owner in Philadelphia recently hired security guards to protect his establishment from the city's rampant crime. Neil Patel, who runs a Carco gas station at Broad and Clearfield Streets in North Philly, said he recruited Philadelphia SITE state agents to protect his employees and customers after the store had been repeatedly ransacked. They are forcing us to hire security, high-level security, state-level security, Patel said. We are tired of the nonsense, the robbery, the drug trafficking, the hanging around, the gangs. Patel explained he was finally moved to hire the security after young people recently vandalized his business and stole his ATM. He also said his car has been vandalized by criminals in the area. We wear Kevlar. We are trained. My guards go to training every other week. They are proficient with their weapons and their tasers. They know the law, said Chief Andre Boyer. Weapons? Yeah. Yeah, they're carrying shotguns and AR-15s and pistols. And they're wearing Kevlar vests. Good. Local residents and neighbors reportedly are of mixed opinion regarding the decision to deploy heavily armed security. I listen to them, but according to some people, violent people, they carry the guns. They're not afraid of them. This is protection for the neighborhood and the customers, said Patel. Correct. Patel said that his business has stopped experiencing any interests or incidents of loitering or other crimes since he started beefing up the security. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that just amazing? You see, that's what happens when politicians believe that their politics is more important than reality. Their politics are more important than reality. They are not. If you neglect the people long enough, they will start providing for themselves. Which, by the way, is antithetical to a republic. You see, it's sort of like having a public utility instead of having 15 different power companies, for example, right? Because if you had 15 different power companies, you'd have 15 different sets of telephone poles, 15 different ways of doing business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they had public utilities, which was fine until they decided to do away with public utilities and privatize everything. Deregulated, you know. Yeah, we deregulated reasonably priced electricity. We've been paying through the nose ever since anyway, but they found a nice little cheesy way around it. They had a company that was designed to handle the actual dispersion of the distribution of the electricity. And then they have all these other people that are actually providing the electricity, which is basically nothing more than a bookkeeping game, which is why it's a mess. Oh, yeah. It's a mess. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Coming up in just a couple of seconds, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the FBI combating terrorism. But who are the terrorists? Stand by. You'll find out in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. This is from Newsweek yesterday. The FBI is conducting 3 times as many domestic terrorism investigations as it was 5 years ago. 70% of its open cases are focused on civil unrest and anti-government activity, according to FBI documents and government specialists. The Bureau has also quietly changed the general classification of white supremacy, anti-Semitism, abortion, and anti-LGBTQ-related extremism to hate crimes rather than terrorism, since terrorism remains the top national security priority. This has lowered the visibility and resources dedicated to those issues. The FBI considers all violent acts and threats of violence with a political motive to be terrorism, according to a senior government official explaining to Newsweek, but not all acts of extremism are considered terrorism. If an act is focused on the government, it's terrorism. But if extremism is focused on private individuals or institutions, it's considered just a crime or classified as a hate crime. The source was granted anonymity to speak about classified matters. On one level, the senior government source says it's more a precise definition of domestic terrorism. The label is applied only to acts with political motives and mass casualties. But in reality, the tweaked classification inserts the FBI and counterterror investigators into the political life of the nation. Are you seeing what's going on here? You see, what they're doing is they're defining terrorism in different ways to suit different occasions. If it's against the government, it's terrorism. And all of the trappings of counterterror and all of the money and so on and so forth from anti-terror organizations in the FBI and other federal law enforcement are brought to bear. But if, say, for example, political, shall we say, political unrest is focused on a non-government agency, well, that's not terrorism. That's just extremism or a hate crime. Oh, I see. Yeah. You see, that way, say, for example, you don't tell everybody that they're a terrorist. What's really fascinating about all of this is as follows. The FBI is ramping up spending to fight MAGA terrorism. MAGA terrorism. Really? Yeah, okay. According to internal FBI numbers obtained by Newsweek, racially or ethnically motivated violent extremism was considered the prime threat and dominated investigations before January 6th. Since then, anti-government, anti-authority, and civil unrest cases have taken over as the number one threat, making up almost 90% of all investigations. A hate crime is targeted violence motivated by the offender's bias against a person's actual or perceived characteristics, said an FBI report. While a domestic terrorism incident involves acts dangerous to human life that are in violation of criminal laws and in furtherance of a social or political goal. As the number of cases involving politics has expanded, the FBI has doubled the number of agents working on that subject. It's not because the FBI is partisan, but more because society and Washington remains obsessed with January 6th than Donald Trump, said the senior government official. It doesn't matter whether the activity is left or right, anti-Biden or anti-Trump, says the official. That's the pool of suspected terrorists. In other words, the focus is now political terrorism. Of 2,700 open cases where an individual or a group of individuals have been designated domestic terrorists by the FBI, almost a third relate to the 2021 riot at the U.S. Capitol or subsequent political activity connected to it. Since then, the counterterrorism agencies have also focused on transnational links of domestic individuals and groups, an approach that provides the intelligence agencies more authority to conduct surveillance and intrusive collection of information. Yeah. Okay, so transnational links to domestic individuals. Okay. Domestic terrorism investigations are being conducted in all 50 states. and in all 56 FBI field offices, says the FBI, with more than double the number of investigators assigned to domestic terrorism work since January 6th. FBI Director Christopher Wray testified before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee on November 17th, discussing the number of open cases and what the FBI labels domestic violent extremism. Individuals based and operating primarily within the United States or its territories without direction or inspiration from a foreign terrorist group or other foreign power who seek to further political or social goals, wholly or in part through unlawful acts of force and violence, are described as domestic violent extremists, while foreign-inspired domestic terrorists are called HVEs, homeland violent extremists. The FBI uses 5 categories to describe violent extremism: racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, including white supremacists, anti-government or anti-authority violent extremists, including everyone from militias to Antifa, violent extremism associated with civil unrest, animal rights, environmental violent extremists, and abortion-related violent extremists. As of October 1st, 2021, according to the latest FBI numbers, 69% of all investigations relate to anti-government and civil unrest-related acts. Military-related investigations contribute to the most rapidly growing group since 2020. Racially and ethnically motivated acts can constitute just 19% of the total number of investigations. Animal rights and environmental investigations make up 1%. Currently, no abortion-related extremism investigations that are labeled domestic terrorism. The last abortion-related domestic terrorism investigation closed on September 2020, according to FBI records. How interesting. What about Jane sent us? Or Ruth sent us? It's Ruth sent us. What's the other one? Jane's Revenge, or what is that? They've been perpetrating acts of extremism. It's just against pregnancy centers as opposed to abortion clinics. See, that's when it gets right back down to this senior person talking a little bit about how it's not partisan, left or right, Biden or Trump, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. I've been doing some research. I've been doing a little bit of research. How many people were arrested in the Capitol 6th riot? How many people? 800. Correct. How many of those people went to comprehensive jail? 8. Right. That's exactly right. 800 people. How many Capitol riots were there? 1. 1 Capitol riot. 800 people. 8 comprehensively arrested. 2 of them convicted harshly. Others convicted less harshly. 1 riot. People keep saying, well, what about the BLM riots? Well, people were arrested there too. Listen to this. This from the United States Department of Justice. My goodness gracious. The Department of Justice announced today, and by the way, this is September 24th, 2020. This is old, but you have to keep in mind what we're talking about here is also old. The Department of Justice announced that more than 300 individuals in 29 states and Washington, D.C. have been charged for crimes committed adjacent to or under the guise of peaceful demonstrations since the end of May. These are the BLM Antifa riots of the summer of 2020. To date, of the 94 U.S. attorneys' offices, more than 40 USAOs, United States Attorney's Offices, have filed federal charges alleging crimes ranging from attempted murder, assaulting a law enforcement officer, arson, burglary of a federally licensed firearms dealer, damaging federal property, malicious destruction of property using fire or explosives, felons in possessions of a firearm and ammunition, unlawful possession of a destructive device, inciting a riot, felony civil disorder, and others. Violent opportunists have exploited these demonstrations in various ways. 80 individuals were charged with offenses relating to arson and explosives. Approximately 15 individuals have been charged with damaging federal property. In some instances, these individuals are alleged to have set fires to local businesses, as well as city and federal property, which will regrettably incur millions of taxpayer dollars to repair the damages to the, listen, Portland Courthouse, Nashville Courthouse, Minneapolis Police 3rd Precinct, Seattle Police East Precinct, local high schools in Minnesota, and to replace police cruisers in South Carolina, Washington, Rhode Island, Georgia, Utah, and other states. Corporate and local businesses also targeted. Target corporate headquarters in Minneapolis, Boost Mobile Store in Milwaukee, Champs Sports Store in Tampa, a pizza parlor in Los Angeles, a sushi bar in Santa Monica. In Washington, D.C., a man was engulfed in flames after he poured liquid from a gas can into 3 U.S. Supreme Court police vehicles. He suffered severe burns. In Virginia Beach, authorities identified a man who was alleged to have threatened to burn down an African-American church. You know what I'm missing here? How many police cruisers did the January 6 people set fire to? So there were 800 people at the Capitol that were arrested in one event. There were 300 people that were arrested across the country in hundreds of events. And now, in Newsweek magazine, we hear an article about the FBI is ramping up spending to fight MAGA terrorism. MAGA terrorism. Make America Great Again terrorism. That's what we're doing here? Does anybody see anything wrong with any of this yet? You seen anything out of kilter as I used words earlier today? You know, I've been talking about the fact that I never saw any FBI wanted posters about people who were plainly on video during the BLM riots. We saw people that were taken from video on FBI wanted posters from one end of the country to the other from the Capitol riot. Why didn't we see those with the BLM folks? We arrested 800 people in one event. The DOJ and the FBI arrested 300 people in hundreds of events. The crimes that were at those events were far, far greater under anyone's point of view than the ones at the Capitol riot. But now we have the FBI chasing down MAGA terrorists instead of BLM terrorists. MAGA terrorists instead of Antifa terrorists. And oh, by the way, when we're reading all those handy definitions of just who is a terrorist and under what circumstances they are terrorists, Antifa is a European terrorist organization that's being exported to the United States. That changes the game just a little bit. But no, what we're doing is we're looking for MAGA terrorists. And we just so happen to have changed the definition of what a terrorist is to anybody that's doing anti-government activity. Now, there's something about freedom of assembly and being able to petition the government for redress of grievances that could be easily defined as a terrorist attack. Huh. Now, what does all this add up to? Yes, and Gary points out, by the way, did any of the BLM terrorists end up in solitary confinement in a federal pokey for almost a year or maybe a year and a half? Did any of those end up in that situation? You know, I can't think of a single one. But I can't think of 8 that have in the Washington, D.C. pokey. So the next time somebody comes up to you and says, hey, you know what? Hey, there were people that were arrested during those BLM riots. Yeah, almost less than half of the people that were arrested at the Capitol riot, less than half of that number were arrested in hundreds of BLM riots all across the country. My goodness gracious, 74 people actually face charges. BLM terrorists barely slowed down through a police station. They happened to be, if they happened to be arrested. Well, yeah, they weren't arrested because they weren't trying to commit a coup against the United States. No. Those people that were setting fire to police officers and what have you, police cruisers, they were after social justice. You can see the difference, right? What? You can't see the difference? This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. You can find us on the chat room. We had a great chat this week. Had a great chat so far this week, and certainly today. We want to thank the people that are taking part in our chat room today. While we're on the subject of fair, unfair, real, unreal, you know, the politics of everything, how the Supreme Court of the United States is trying to figure out whether somebody can decide not to do business with someone else based on the fact that they have religious beliefs that are in conflict with the supposed clients who want them to do something that violates their religious precepts. A Virginia-based conservative Christian advocacy group was turned away from a local restaurant an hour before their reservation last week. A representative of the Family Foundation said he was frustrated after the group was turned away from the Metzger Bar and Butchery last Wednesday. The group claims the refusal had to do with their religious beliefs. According to Todd Gaffney, he is the director of government relations for the Family Foundation. One of the owners of Metzger called a representative of the Family Foundation about an hour before the reservation time, saying the group would not be dining at the restaurant. Quote, "We've had events at restaurants all over the city and never encountered a situation like this," said Gaffney. "It's no secret that we're very much engaged in the public policy debate on a number of controversial issues, but we never expected we'd be denied service at a restaurant based on our religious values or our political beliefs. For businesses like restaurants, federal and state laws do not allow discrimination based on protected classes like race, religion, sex, and more, as defined by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's not clear whether this incident falls under one of those protected classes." Well, no, you're going to have to go to court for that. Okay, so you essentially, if you happen to have any kind of political beliefs that go against the status quo ante of the anti-American left, okay, then you need to be able to have a lawyer on retainer and his telephone number in case you get turned away from a dinner that you've been planning for a while and find out an hour beforehand it's not going to happen. Is that the way people who disagree with the leftist orthodoxy status quo, is that the new default reality? Go to dinner and bring your lawyer? Is that it? Yeah. In a Facebook post the following day, Metzger wrote the restaurant has very rarely refused service to anybody who wished to dine with us. However, the restaurant added, "We have always refused service to anyone for making our staff feel uncomfortable and unsafe, and that was the driving force behind our decision." Oh, I see. The restaurant noted many staff members were LGBTQ or women that it believed the Family Foundation sought to deprive women and LGBTQ plus persons of their basic rights in Virginia. Really? Gaffney has previously written for the Family Foundation about a stalled effort in 2021 to remove an unenforceable provision of the Virginia Constitution, invalidated by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2015, that defines marriage as between one man and one woman, saying that removing it would open the door to polygamous, incestuous, kinship, or even child marriages. You know, that's what happens when you overplay your hand. Okay? Gaffney said he thought it was unfair of the restaurant to deny service over the group's religious beliefs. It's very intolerant. It's a very intolerant message being conveyed. Well, remember, being tolerant is only for people that agree with us. We will be tolerant if you agree. And if you agree that our standards for being tolerant are righteous and being followed, we'll tolerate you. But if you cross any of those lines, we become intolerant as hell. We become vindictive. We become destructive. We become the people that key your cars. We become the people that we theoretically despise, at least when the television cameras are rolling. Yeah, this is a mess. Yeah. The Family Foundation said it's open to the possibility of a sit-down so that something like this never happens again. We'd like to welcome an opportunity to have a discussion with them, said Gaffney. Meet with them in a private setting where we can have a heart-to-heart about some of the issues. Why? Why? You see, the LGBTQ community involves about 5.3 to 5.5% of the population. Okay? That's about all there is. So, if indeed Metzger Bar and Butchery want to go after 5.3% of the available customer base in Virginia, in Richmond, Virginia, then by all means let them. If that's who they want to cater to, respect it. Respect it. Stay out of the way. Why would you have a meeting with people that would not even allow you to eat at their restaurants? There's no basis for discussion there. So what you do is you just pass the word to those people that follow your group that you're not welcome at that restaurant. They'll find someplace else to go, and sooner or later, the realities of dealing with 5.3% of the available customer base at a particular restaurant will catch up to them. And then maybe you can go to that restaurant with the new honors. This has been the Wells Report. Hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you again tomorrow. All right, my dear friends, there you go. Yet another broadcast in the can. Let's see what else is going on. Question for Gary. Chickens chasing you chasing you across the farm. Lubbock has 2 power companies. You're sounding like you live in my part of the world. I don't know what that means. I think he's asking if you live in Lubbock. Let's see. It's really outrageous. 1 hour's notice. Yep. Oh, please. Easy excuse. Yeah. Yeah, it's a mess. They're going to be out of business soon. Let them be out of business. Yep. Finally got to be here for the entire 3 hours. Great show as usual. Thanks for the kid that works earlier. You're welcome, John. Thanks very much for being with us today. All right, you guys, I got to run because I got to get rolling. I'll have more time to watch these days after May 2023. All right, my friend, I've got to get going. Got something I got to go do. So peace, love, joy to you and all of yours.